The sun beat down on the black asphalt, making the highway shimmer like a mirage. Inside a bright red sports car, Jake grinned, tapping his fingers impatiently on the steering wheel. He loved the feeling of the engine rumbling beneath him, the wind whipping through his hair, even though it was gelled into place. Today was a good day, and Jake intended to make it even better by showing off his driving skills. He weaved in and out of traffic, cutting off a minivan full of kids and then tailgating a slow-moving sedan. "Come on, Gramps, move it or lose it," he muttered under his breath, before swerving into the next lane. He felt a surge of adrenaline with each risky maneuver. This was living. He glanced at the speedometer, way over the limit. He didn't care. Rules were for people who couldn't handle the road. Jake could handle anything. He was the best driver around, or so he believed. He turned up the music, the bass thumping loudly, adding to the chaotic energy of his driving. He was a blur of red, a menace on wheels, completely oblivious to the potential consequences of his actions. He was young, cocky, and convinced of his own invincibility. Little did he know, his reckless joyride was about to take a sharp, unexpected turn. Meanwhile, a few cars back, Mr. Peterson drove his trusty, old pickup truck. It was a faded blue, with a dent on the driver's side door, a souvenir from his younger days. He wasn't in a hurry. He'd seen enough hurry in his life. He was on his way to the hardware store to pick up some supplies for his garden. Mr. Peterson was a man of routine and quiet observation. His years in the army had taught him to be alert, to anticipate, and to react calmly under pressure. He always drove defensively, scanning the road ahead, checking his mirrors frequently. He noticed Jake's red sports car weaving aggressively through the traffic. He sighed, shaking his head slightly. Young people these days, he thought, so impatient. He maintained a safe distance from the other vehicles, his hand steady on the wheel. The radio played softly, an old country tune providing a gentle soundtrack to his drive. He was a picture of serenity, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of Jake's reckless driving. He represented patience, experience, and responsibility, qualities that Jake sorely lacked at that moment. Mr. Peterson's calm demeanor was about to be tested, not by a battlefield, but by a careless young man in a hurry. Suddenly, Jake swerved directly in front of Mr. Peterson, cutting him off with barely a car's length to spare. Mr. Peterson reacted instantly, slamming on his brakes. The tires of his old truck screeched in protest, leaving black marks on the asphalt. His body lurched forward, the seatbelt digging into his chest. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. He managed to avoid a collision, but only just. His heart pounded in his chest, a rare surge of adrenaline jolting him awake. He watched in disbelief as Jake sped away, disappearing into the distance. In his rearview mirror, Mr. Peterson saw Jake's brake lights flash briefly, followed by a mocking wave from the driver. Mr. Peterson felt a flicker of anger, quickly replaced by a deep sense of disappointment. He shook his head again, muttering to himself, "Some people never learn." He took a deep breath, calming himself, and cautiously pulled back onto the highway, adjusting his rearview mirror to keep an eye on the red sports car in the distance. He had a bad feeling about what he had just witnessed. "Did you see that, man?" Jake exclaimed to his passenger, a young woman named Sarah, who was nervously gripping the door handle. "That old guy almost wrecked his truck. He's lucky I'm such a good driver." He chuckled, completely oblivious to the fear he had just instilled in Mr. Peterson and the danger he had created. Sarah, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "Jake, maybe you should slow down a little. I'm getting kind of scared." Jake scoffed. "Scared? What's there to be scared of? I'm in control." Besides, he added with a wink, a little excitement never hurt anyone. He reached over and turned the music up even louder, drowning out Sarah's protests. He glanced at her briefly, noticing her pale face, but dismissed her concerns. He was too caught up in his own self-importance to care about her feelings. He bragged about how many times he'd gotten away with speeding tickets and near misses, painting himself as some kind of driving superhero. He was completely unaware that his overconfidence was about to lead to something far more serious than a speeding ticket. The road ahead held a dangerous curve, and Jake's arrogance blinded him to the impending threat. The curve came up quickly, much faster than Jake anticipated. He tried to brake, but it was too late. The tires squealed as the car began to skid. He wrestled with the steering wheel, but the car was unresponsive, a wild beast now out of his control. "Whoa," he yelled, a flicker of fear finally registering in his eyes. Sarah screamed, burying her face in her hands. The car spun around, careening towards the side of the road. Jake frantically tried to regain control, but the momentum was too great. He felt a sickening lurch as the car left the pavement, heading straight for a large oak tree. Time seemed to slow down. He saw the tree looming closer, its rough bark a stark contrast to the shiny red paint of his sports car. He braced himself for impact, a wave of regret washing over him. He had been so foolish, so arrogant. Now, his recklessness was about to catch up with him in the most brutal way possible. The world became a blur of spinning metal and shattered glass, culminating in a deafening crash that echoed through the quiet countryside. Mr. Peterson, who had been keeping a watchful eye on the red sports car in his rearview mirror, saw the whole thing unfold. He watched in horror as Jake's car careened out of control, a sickening ballet of metal and glass culminating in a violent impact against the oak tree. Without hesitation, Mr. Peterson pulled his truck over to the side of the road, his heart pounding in his chest. He grabbed his first aid kit from behind the seat, his military training kicking in. There was no time to waste. He had to help. He approached the wreckage cautiously, assessing the scene. Smoke billowed from the crumpled hood of the car, the smell of gasoline heavy in the air. The driver's side was crushed, the windshield shattered. He could hear Sarah moaning softly inside. He knew he had to act quickly and decisively if he wanted to save their lives. The image of Jake waving mockingly at him flashed through his mind, but he pushed it aside. This wasn't about revenge or retribution, it was about helping someone in need. It was about doing what was right. Mr. Peterson carefully pried open the mangled driver's side door. Jake was slumped over the steering wheel, unconscious. He had a gash on his forehead, and Mr. Peterson could see blood trickling down his face. He quickly checked Jake's pulse, relieved to find it weak but steady. He then turned his attention to Sarah, who was conscious but clearly in shock. "Stay still, miss," he said in a calm, reassuring voice. "Help is on the way." He gently checked her for any obvious injuries, finding only minor cuts and bruises. Using his first aid kit, he cleaned Jake's wound and applied a pressure bandage to stop the bleeding. He carefully stabilized Jake's neck, mindful of potential spinal injuries. He knew it was crucial to keep him still until the paramedics arrived. Every move was precise and efficient, a testament to his years of training. He spoke to Jake even though he was unconscious, telling him to hang in there, that everything was going to be all right. He was a beacon of calm amidst the chaos, a steady hand in a desperate situation. Cook groaned, his eyes fluttering open. He blinked, trying to focus. His head throbbed, and his vision was blurry. What happened?" he mumbled, his voice raspy. Mr. Peterson knelt beside him, his voice calm and steady. "You were in an accident, son. Just stay still. Help is on its way." Jake looked around, confused. He saw the crumpled remains of his car, the shattered windshield, the smoke rising from the hood. Panic started to set in. "Sarah? Is Sarah okay?" "She's fine, just a little shaken up," Mr. Peterson reassured him. "I've already checked her over. You're the one I'm worried about right now. Just try to relax and don't move your head." Jake tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his body. He cried out, collapsing back against the seat. I can't feel my legs," he whispered, his voice filled with fear. Mr. Peterson placed a reassuring hand on Jake's shoulder. "It's okay, son. Just breathe. Everything is going to be all right. The paramedics are almost here." He maintained eye contact with Jake, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the young man's growing panic. He knew he had to keep Jake calm until professional help arrived. The sound of sirens grew louder, finally arriving in a flurry of flashing lights and urgent voices. Paramedics rushed to the scene, quickly assessing Jake and Sarah's conditions. They carefully extracted Jake from the wreckage, placing him on a stretcher and securing him with straps. "This man did a great job stabilizing him," one of the paramedics said, nodding towards Mr. Peterson. "His quick thinking probably saved his life." Another paramedic examined Sarah, who was still visibly shaken but thankfully unharmed. "You're lucky to be alive, miss," she said. "This could have been much worse." As they prepared to transport Jake to the hospital, one of the paramedics turned to Mr. Peterson. "Are you a doctor?" she asked. Mr. Peterson shook his head. "Just a retired army sergeant," he replied modestly. "I just did what I could." He watched as they loaded Jake into the ambulance, a wave of relief washing over him. He had done his part. Now, it was up to the medical professionals. He hoped Jake would be okay. He also hoped that Jake would learn a valuable lesson from this near-fatal experience. As the paramedics were securing Jake in the ambulance, Jake's gaze drifted towards Mr. Peterson. He squinted, trying to get a better look. Recognition slowly dawned on his face. His eyes widened in disbelief. It was the man he had cut off just minutes before, the man he had mocked with a careless wave. 7 minutes. It had been only 7 minutes since he had treated Mr. Peterson with such disrespect. 7 minutes that had changed his life forever. A wave of shame washed over him, stronger than any physical pain he was experiencing. He couldn't believe it. The person who had risked his own safety to save him, the person who had kept him calm and stabilized his injuries, was the same person he had treated so poorly. The irony was almost unbearable. He wanted to say something, to apologize, but his throat was tight with emotion. He felt utterly foolish and ashamed. The cocky arrogance that had defined him just moments ago had completely vanished, replaced by a profound sense of guilt and regret. He knew he had to find a way to make amends. As the paramedics lifted the stretcher into the ambulance, Jake strained his neck to look at Mr. Peterson. He managed to croak out a few words, his voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry," he said, tears welling up in his eyes. For everything. For cutting you off. For being such an idiot." He paused, struggling to breathe. You saved my life. And I don't deserve it." Mr. Peterson walked over to the ambulance, his expression calm and compassionate. He leaned down, his eyes meeting Jake's. "Don't worry about it, son," he said gently. "Just focus on getting better. We all make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them." Jake's grip tightened on the stretcher. "I will," he promised, his voice barely a whisper. "I promise I will." He closed his eyes, overwhelmed with gratitude and remorse. He knew he had been given a second chance, and he was determined not to waste it. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and with a final flash of lights, he was gone. But the image of Mr. Peterson's kind face, and the weight of his own foolish actions, would stay with him for a long time to come. Mr. Peterson watched the ambulance disappear down the road, then turned his attention to Sarah, who was still standing by the side of the road, looking lost and confused. He walked over to her, his expression kind and reassuring. "Are you going to be all right, miss?" he asked gently. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. I don't know what I'm going to do," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't want to drive with him ever again." Mr. Peterson sighed. "Well, I'm heading into town. I can give you a ride wherever you need to go." As they walked towards his truck, Mr. Peterson said, "You know, that young man is going to have a lot of time to think about his choices. Sometimes, it takes a close call to make us realize the importance of respecting others and following the rules." He paused, then added, "Driving isn't just about getting from point A to point B. It's about responsibility, awareness, and considering the safety of everyone around you." He hoped that his words would sink in, not just for Jake, but for Sarah as well. The road was a dangerous place, and it demanded respect. Flashback star. A young Mr. Peterson, clad in his army uniform, stood beside a dusty jeep in a war-torn village. He was tending to a wounded child, his face etched with concern. The sounds of gunfire echoed in the distance, but his focus remained solely on the little boy in his arms. "It's going to be all right, son," he said softly, his voice a comforting balm amidst the chaos. "We're going to get you help." His fellow soldiers watched in admiration. They knew Mr. Peterson was a tough and skilled soldier, but they also knew him to be a man of deep compassion and unwavering integrity. He had always put the needs of others before his own, whether on the battlefield or back home. He believed in service, in duty, and in treating everyone with respect and dignity, regardless of their background or circumstances. His commanding officer approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've got a good heart, Peterson," he said. "Don't ever lose that." The young Mr. Peterson looked up, his eyes filled with determination. "I won't, sir," he replied firmly. "I promise you, I won't." End flashback star. This memory, though decades old, still defined Mr. Peterson. It was a reminder of the values that had guided his life and the principles that had shaped him into the man he was today. It explained why, even after being disrespected and endangered, he had chosen to help a reckless young man in need. It was simply who he was. Weeks later, Jake was recovering in the hospital. The accident had left him with a broken leg and a newfound appreciation for life. He spent hours reflecting on his past behavior, replaying the events of that fateful day in his mind. The shame he felt was still raw, but it was slowly being replaced by a determination to make amends. He knew he had to find Mr. Peterson and thank him properly, to express the depth of his gratitude and to apologize again for his reckless actions. He asked Sarah to help him locate the veteran, and she readily agreed, feeling a sense of responsibility for what had happened. After several days of searching, they finally found Mr. Peterson's address. Jake, still using crutches, insisted on going to see him in person. He wanted to look him in the eye and tell him how much he had changed. He knew that words alone couldn't undo the past, but he hoped that his sincerity would be enough to convey the depth of his transformation. He was no longer the cocky, arrogant young man who had sped down the highway that day. He was a humbled, grateful person, eager to learn from his mistakes and to make a positive impact on the world. Leaning heavily on his crutches, stood nervously on Mr. Peterson's porch. He took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Mr. Peterson opened the door, a surprised look on his face. "Well, hello there, son," he said, recognizing Jake immediately. "I wasn't expecting to see you." "Mr. Peterson," Jake began, his voice filled with sincerity. I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life. And I'm so sorry for the way I treated you that day. I was a fool." Mr. Peterson smiled kindly. "Come on in, Jake. You don't have to stand out there on those crutches." He led Jake inside, offering him a seat on the comfortable sofa. Sarah stood awkwardly by the door. "And you must be Sarah," Mr. Peterson said, extending his hand. "It's good to see you're doing all right." As Jake sat down, he continued, "I've learned a lot these past few weeks, Mr. Peterson. About responsibility, about respect, about the value of life. I promise you, I'm going to be a different person from now on." Mr. Peterson nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "I believe you, Jake. And I'm glad you're here. Now, how about a glass of lemonade?" As Mr. Peterson went to the kitchen, he turned back and offered, "I am heading into town later, would you like a ride home when you are done?" As they sat on the porch of Mr. Peterson's home, sipping lemonade, an unexpected conversation unfolded. Jake shared his dreams of becoming a mechanic, his passion for cars now tempered with a deep respect for their power and potential for harm. Mr. Peterson, in turn, spoke of his time in the army, the lessons he had learned about leadership, responsibility, and the importance of looking out for one another. They discovered a shared love of old cars, a mutual appreciation for hard work, and a surprising connection that transcended their age difference and their vastly different experiences. Sarah, who had initially been nervous and quiet, started to relax, drawn in by the warmth and genuine connection between the two men. When it was time for Mr. Peterson to drive them back to town, Jake carefully settled into the passenger seat of the old pickup truck, a far cry from the sports car he used to drive. As they drove, they continued to talk, their conversation flowing easily, filled with laughter and shared insights. An unlikely friendship was blossoming, forged in the crucible of a near-fatal accident and the transformative power of forgiveness. Mr. Peterson realized that sometimes, the most meaningful connections are formed in the most unexpected circumstances. Epilogue star. Years later, Jake, now a skilled and respected mechanic, drove carefully down the same highway where he had once been so reckless. He was driving an old pickup truck, a project he had lovingly restored with Mr. Peterson's help. He kept his speed within the limit, his eyes constantly scanning the road, ever mindful of the safety of others. He often visited Mr. Peterson, helping him with his garden and listening to his stories. They had become the best of friends, an unlikely pair brought together by fate and forged in the fires of forgiveness. One sunny afternoon, as they were working on an old engine together, Mr. Peterson smiled and said, "You know, Jake, I always knew you had good in you. You just needed a little nudge in the right direction." Jake grinned, wiping grease from his hands. "Thanks to you, Mr. Peterson," he said. "You showed me what it really means to be a responsible person." He looked out at the open road, a sense of gratitude filling his heart. He was no longer the cocky young man who had thought he was invincible. He was a changed person, a better person, thanks to the accident and the kindness of a retired veteran who had taught him the true meaning of respect, responsibility, and the enduring power of the human spirit. The end star.